question of the week talks about, the let's talk about taking care of ourselves, suffering a little bit of that burnout. It's been an interesting, tough, challenging year and a half. What do you say to retailers when you get this question, Dan?
Well, so I got this question from Carol, and it said, "Hey, hi, Dan. Good morning, Dan." I should read it. I shouldn't just ad-lib it. It says, "Good morning, Dan. I've owned my store for almost 8 years and feeling really tired this summer. Can you share some tips or advice on dealing with burnout? P.S." I love this part. I had to put it down. P.S. I listen to your podcast every week,
Nice.
And each week I learn or relearn something about retail. Thank you, Carol. Well, Carol, as I said, now here's the thing. I don't know where Carol's from. All I had was the email, no phone number, no nothing, no store name. So I just sent Carol an email and said, of course, thank you very much with a little love heart. I love that you listen to the podcast and that you get something out of it, and super appreciative of the question, because we all feel burnout. And this isn't just about retail burnout. This is about entrepreneurial burnout, no matter what business you're in. And I'm going to preface, as I did for Carol, this sort of response by saying it's imperative that you have the ability to separate the real from the bullshit. Okay. You've got to know when you're using an excuse versus a reason. And Rob, important sort of to highlight here, every single one of us at some point feels burnt out. And the biggest contributor to burnout in any business is our inability to see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? It gets dark and dreary. We can't see the light. We don't lift our head up. We don't take a deep breath, and we begin to burn out, right? The inability to see a different tomorrow than you're experiencing today creates burnout. And for me, I really, had to think about how I wanted to respond to this, because again, I'm a guy that gets burnt out. I sometimes work more than maybe I want to or should or whatever. And, I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall, and you get burnt out. So I kind of looked at, well, what things do I do when I start feeling like I'm a bit burnt out? And number one for me, to avoid burnout, you got to have vision. You got to have a vision. You got to have a dot on the map that you're working towards. Every day can't just happen. It has to happen with intention. Yeah. And by not having a vision, we hit the ceiling. We hit this entrepreneurial ceiling. We don't know where we're going. And what we're experiencing today feels like it's just going to replicate itself over and over and over again. And today can't just happen. It has to happen with intention. All right, want to avoid burnout? Create a good vision. Work towards something where you can start checking it off the list. And for me, this is kind of rolled right into number 2. You want to avoid burnout, you got to be an obedient follower to a predetermined schedule. Now, you've heard this before. He's a slave to the calendar. He spends all day on to-dos and blah, 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 blah. I'm not saying overrun yourself. I'm saying you need to be an obedient follower of a predetermined schedule. You create the schedule. Be a great time manager. Schedule yourself accordingly, ensuring that you're building in clarity breaks and hair and nail appointments and soccer games and wine Wednesdays. All right? It's got to be built. All right? I look at clients' calendars and I generally see 2 things. Emptiness, right? Or a calendar so full of to-dos with no personal time built in that it just creates this burnout. There is no reprieve, right? You've got to build in your clarity breaks. You've got to build in, and I tell this to my team, don't ever bullshit me about what's in your calendar. If you've got to go to a barber or a hair appointment or, take your kid to the dentist, just put it in there. It's part of our life. And that's part of being flexible. And we've got to do that ourselves. I am never embarrassed to share my calendar with someone because it's got, 2 afternoons off a week to play golf. Yeah. Right? That's part of my clarity. That's part of the most frustrating game in the frickin' world. I'm never happy when I leave the golf course. I'm happy to get there.
As long as you get one good shot in, that's what brings you back.
But you see, I build that into my day.
Yeah.
And so now I have this clarity, this free time to look forward to that helps alleviate the burnout. And now I'm going to go back and say, remember what I said, you got to be able to separate the real from the bullshit. Everybody that says I can't, it's bullshit, right? It's about how you structure yourself and using this assistant, right? Assistant, calendar, checklist, whatever. If I use it as my checklist of accomplishments, making sure what gets in there gets done, and that there's balance between, what's important now and what's achievable now. These two things have to coexist. Otherwise, a to-do isn't worth to-doing, right? You've got to balance when and when, what's important and what's achievable. If you're spending all your time on what you believe is important but not yet achievable, burnout's knocking on your back door, right? Focus your energy on both important and achievable. Knock things off your to-do list. Feel this great sense of accomplishment. There's pride in accomplishment, and it'll alleviate that feeling of burnout, right? The other thing, I'm going to just say it again because it's important. If you're not building me time into your calendar of events, into your day, you're going to burn yourself out, right? Number 3, for me, my number 3 takeaway, what do I do when I'm feeling burnt out? I fill my bucket. I get burnt out when my bucket's empty, not when my bucket overfloweth, right? So you've got to figure out what fills my bucket. Is it family time? Is it vacation time? Is it, going to a trade show and being inspired by those around me? Does that fill my bucket? And filling your bucket should be always the first thing you do. We've said this, we've heard this, we preach this, we practice this. I can't fill your bucket, brother, if my bucket's empty. I got nothing to fill it with.
Great point.
Right? And for some of us, the bucket overfloweth when we spend more time with our loved ones, when we, spend more alone time, when we take that walk, or when we do travel, or we go to trade shows, or we be inspired. When I listen to a great podcast, I maybe get a little bit of inspiration that's feeding into my bucket. You want to prevent burnout? It's so easy. It's so easy. Easy, maybe easier said than done. Have a vision. Be an obedient follower of your schedule, not someone else's, and fill your bucket every single day. Do something that refills or helps to refill your bucket. If you do that, burnout is not really one of our conversations. Conversations are more like, how do I take advantage of this opportunity? I'm too effing tired for this.
That's great, Dan. Great advice. That I don't care what business you're in, you can take that one and you can start filling your bucket today. It's almost like you want something done, go ask the busiest person in the room.
It's true,
because their bucket's full, and I love the you can't give nothing if you got an empty bucket on that front. So I'm sure there's some other questions out there. How do folks connect, Dan?
Carol, I'm going to say this again. Thank you so much, not just for listening to the podcast, but finding some value in it and then taking advantage of an opportunity to throw a question or a challenge out there. I hope the spoken word comes off better than the written word that you got from me on Monday. And if other retailers have questions, Rob, we've said this before. I don't care what the topic is. I don't care if it's not even about your retail store. Send me a question with something that you're challenged with. Send it to dan@thewealthyretailer.com, and I promise we'll get an answer that will help to fill your bucket and inspire some change.